Have you ever felt like you don't really fit in? That what most people consider to be normal or fun is pretty much alien to you. The whole concept is just alien, and vice versa. Anything that things that you find to be really, really fun or really enjoyable, or things that you believe in, seem like alien beliefs to other people around you, and you don't really know how you can orient yourself around this world, and you don't know how to deal with these kinds of people. Well, this video is going to try to do two things. One, it's going to try to make sure that you don't feel completely alone. And B, it's going to try to help you to walk through how you can sort of navigate this and navigate around these kinds of people. So let's just get straight to it. So, as you can see, I decided to go into a mirror board. Maybe I'm entering my Alex Becker arc, but let me know if you guys want me to go, if you guys like this, or if you guys prefer physical whiteboards like normal. But anyway, so the reason why you don't seem to fit in with society as a whole is because, or at least your society, is because the expectations and perception that you have of yourself is completely different to your society. So what do I mean by your society? So you can think of everyone you know as kind of like a network of nodes almost. So let's just go ahead and draw like a circle almost, like a dot. That's a terrible dot actually. But in any case, so let's just go ahead and we'll drag in another circle. So imagine this first layer is, let's just grab this over here. Let's say this first layer is your family. Let's say the second layer is probably your friends. Let's say this third layer is probably going to be people that you're associated to either professionally or personally. So that could be people you're like acquaintances with that you're not particularly close with, or people you work with. And then you can go ahead and think of this as, I guess you could say, society as a whole here, and just people you haven't yet met, based on your current, based on who you currently are. This is like a set of people that are strangers to you. Now, we can also represent this as like, we can add like the actual nodes in these like layers. So we can say, imagine that this is your family. So I'm just going to draw like some lines here. So, okay, so imagine that this is your family. Then you've got probably more friends. These are absolutely terrible drawings, but bear with me. Now let's say these are like your acquaintances, which are going to be much like larger. So just imagine that I've just done like, a bunch more of these, and then strangers are even going to be even more than that. So the traditional expectations that your current society probably has are going to be things like, having work-life balance. So that's going to be a big one, right? So in my case, let's say, oh gosh, that is a really small font. Make that bigger. Okay, cool. So like, let's just say work-life balance. So that's probably a big one that a lot of people have, and this was certainly true in my case. There's, the belief that you need to just relax or chill. So just chilling, and I'm going to put this in quotation marks here because the argument that honestly a lot of people make about this is that you need to give your brain time to rest, and you need to let it relax and do other things so that way you can solve harder problems. And that is true to an extent, but the way that people approach this idea of relaxing or taking a break is not productive. So Paul Graham has this really great essay where he talks about how some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, how they would relax. And the way that they would relax is they wouldn't. So here's what most people do. Most people would basically consider chilling to be like going and watching mindless YouTube videos or binge watching a bunch of TV shows. But what Paul Graham said was something completely different. What Paul Graham said was that what these people would do is they'll just go and take these different sorts of breaks, these really long breaks, and maybe they'll just go for like a long walk or something, where you don't have any sort of dopamine device near you, so like your phone, and you're just thinking and letting your brain think and drift as it normally would, and then you will come to a solution more naturally. So you can see, like, just directly what like the definition of like chilling is completely different in both of these regards. You got one person, Paul Graham, for example, saying, hey, yes, you need to take a break. You're saying yes, but both people agree on the central point of taking a break to an extent. But one of them saying, don't use your phone or do any dopamine activities. Just think, let your brain wander, and give your brain a chance to think. Because normally, if you're in the weeds in something, it's hard to like take like a bird's eye view and like a bigger picture and try to solve a problem. And on the other side, you've got probably your friends, family, or whatever they're saying, hey, you need to just relax, you need to take life easier, you need to just relax. And and their definition of that is probably going to be things that are just dopamine addictive activities, like binge watching a TV show, for example. So those are two different things. And then maybe the next one, I guess, if you wanted to throw it in there, is maybe like traveling, holidaying. So I'm just going to whack that in there. I'm just going to put other here, miscellaneous. So insert any other belief that your current society has that does not actually align, that you do not actually agree with. And the reason why I say your current society is because this can change. But this is exactly like why these are some of the core beliefs that society, or most people's societies, would have that are probably in disalignment to yours. And if you're watching this channel, you probably don't believe in these three things, at least anyway, or at least not in the normal way. Now, the next reason why you don't seem to fit in is because of perception. So the version who you are to yourself is not equal to the version of you who you are to others. So let me say that again. So the version of who you are to yourself, so in this centralized node, you have your own perception of who you are, and that is a collection of all of your life experiences, beliefs, and identity of who you are. Then on this layer, you have your family, and they probably have a different perception of you. And then above here, you've got your friends, they have their own perception of you. And most of the time, well, I mean, pretty much all the time, other people have their own perception of you that serves their needs. And that can be either in a good way or a bad way. So what do I mean by that? So maybe, for example, your family, for example, say your family has this perception of you, or like this belief about you, an expectation of you that, you know, you should go and be a doctor, right? And they'll probably have their own reasons, because maybe there's like an element, maybe like in most cases, there's probably going to be an element of care there, like, hey, you know, making sure that you have like a stable career, make sure you're safe. But if you know, but maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to go and be an entrepreneur. So completely in the opposite direction. So you want to go this way, and your family want you to go that way, your friends want you to go this way, mainly because it serves their own needs, to some extent anyway. This isn't always the case. There are some people who genuinely just want to make sure you're okay, but and in those situations, when you tell those people what you actually want to do, they'll generally support it. I don't actually recommend, for what it's worth, to tell people what you do or what you want to do, or at least not most people anyway, because most people generally, especially if you're starting out, most people generally are not rooting for you. Some people are, not everyone, and you kind of have to filter that out and do that over time. But that's a different video for a different topic. So the next so that's kind of two reasons to start with. Like, firstly, you have your own perception of who you are, and everyone else has their own perception of who you are. Then you have different aspirations to what everyone else has, and you have, the next thing is that you probably have niche, whatever you want, however the pronunciation is, interests that are just a little bit different, a little bit alien to others. So an example I'll give you is when I was, how old was I? I must have been 21 or 22 maybe. So let's just say 21, 22. So I was in my early 20s, and something I did, which was a weird interest of mine, was I actually, and I still do, enjoy writing essays about things like philosophy, psychology, things that I learned. So I consumed content from people like Paul Graham, Sam Altman, Daniel Gross, and I guess David Sachs as well, for a long time. And, you know, I was like, hey, I actually really like this kind of writing, and let me go ahead and start to become a writer, because why not? You can just sort of do things. And that was a really weird interest, because how many people do you know in their, like, who are like 21, 22, who will say they want to write essays? Most people who are 21, 22 are getting hammered on the weekend. And I'm not saying that I'm better than them, by the way. This isn't me trying to big myself up or saying, oh, look at me, I'm this good boy staying at home just writing essays. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I just had really weird interests, and that most people would not find that interesting or have the initiative or want to do that. And that's completely fine, because I'm very different. I can be different to most people. You're probably different to most people. And that's okay. Everyone has their own sort of interests. So that's probably another reason why you don't fit in. Another reason, which is a really, really good thing, but other people might say is a bad thing, is that you're obsessive. And being obsessive when other people aren't can cause a lot of friction. So, when you're obsessive, here's what happens, right? So let's say this is the start line. Okay, that is really, really faint. Can I use a highlighter? Okay, that is, let me maybe make that darker. Okay, let's say this is the starting line, and here's a finish line to achieving something, right? What normally happens is if you're obsessive about something, you'll zig and zag a bit, and you'll achieve your target over time, right? Time is the dependent variable here, however you want to measure it, and you don't know what that is. For other people, most people that find your obsessive or addictive personality to be a bit weird or uncomfortable, what often happens is they'll also have similar aspirations. But what will happen is they'll run into a zag or a zig and then quit. Then even fewer people will continue to the second zig, and then that's it, they're done. They won't get beyond this line. This is where most people will just quit when they want to accomplish something. So, for example, you wanted to learn piano, learning how to play the piano, and you've never played a musical instrument in your entire life, and you become absolutely obsessed and consumed by the idea of playing piano and becoming the world's best pianist. Then what will happen is over time, your obsession, yes, you're going to run into hurdles. That's kind of a given. That's kind of a given in anything you want to do. Over time, if you just don't quit and you just continue to keep pushing forward and you stay obsessed, you'll eventually get to your goal of becoming a really great pianist, and even then, you'll probably end up realizing there's much more a greenfield to go. But if you're not obsessive, what you'll end up doing is you won't really be as determined to pursue your goals. So most people are not obsessive. So that's why you probably don't fit in. If you think you don't fit in, because most of your friends, maybe they just they have a couple of hobbies, but they're not obsessive about it. They don't care about being world class, or they don't care about being exceptional at it, and you do. That's a difference. That's probably why you don't fit in with most people, because most people are not like this. Most people will generally just quit at the first sign of trouble. So, and look, it makes sense as to why this is the case, right? Now, so, it makes sense why. So, this makes sense why it's not the case. But what can you actually do about it? Actually, there's one point I want to make before we even get into that. But let's talk about this, right? So I've just gone through exactly what societal expectations are and why you don't fit in. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? Now, here's the argument that I would make. Now, most people say that you need to be. Now, I remember I had this discussion a while back with someone I used to be friends with, and the argument he made about hanging out was that people need to be social. That's just how we're biologically hardwired, right? We're hardwired to be social animals, and that's true when you look at it from the surface level. So, for example, is there a way I can make this bigger at all? Okay, let's just see if we can do that. Okay, so what would happen is in the past, in the Paleolithic era, when we were all cavemen, is that we used to exist in tribes, and you can make the argument that we still exist in tribes to an extent today anyway, but let's say you were in this tribe, right? So we're just going to say there's this small tribe, there's a bunch of people, you can't even see those dots, but there's a bunch of people in here. If you're outside of this dot, let's say example you're a caveman, you're not hunting, you're not helping the other cavemen hunt, you'll be exiled from the tribe. As a result of being exiled from the tribe, your chances of survival basically go down by 90+%, right? You needed a tribe to keep you alive, which is exactly why we have this fear of loss when it comes to losing friends. It's because of the fact that, and this is where the whole argument that humans are social animals comes in, is because we used to exist in tribes, and as a tribe we would help each other out, and there'd be their own sort of social hierarchy. And if you were kicked out of this tribe, your chance of survival go down. So your brain, its primitive imperative is just to keep you alive. And the way it keeps you alive, it keeps you within this tribe, which is why you might be afraid to leave your friends. Now, the reason why this is only surface level is because we're not exactly in tribes these days. So in the past, yes, if you, like maybe like tens of thousands of years ago, if you were kicked out of this tribe, you're pretty much dead. But nowadays, with where we are in the world, if you lose your friends, you lose contact with a lot of people that who are currently in your existence. I guess your node layer, your node network of society, your node society, right? If you lose connections to most of those nodes, if not all of them, you're not going to die. In most cases, you're probably not going to die. You might feel uncomfortable, but what will end up happening is that after you sort of separate yourself away from all of those nodes in the network and you sort of dissociate yourself, what will happen is you'll feel this weird this discomfort where you just sort of feel unease because you're alone. But over time, what will happen is you'll just become good with yourself. And that is something that most people are not. Now, this isn't me saying, hey, you need to cut out every single person in your life completely. But what it is saying is that if you did, you would probably be okay. Because we're not in that Paleolithic era anymore. Like, if you're able to, stand on your own 2 feet, then you'll be okay. Without that existent society. Now, you're going to feel loneliness for a while, and that's okay. Alex Hormozi talks about this lonely chapter, and I'll make a video about that, and I guess how you can try to sort of, handle that as appropriately as possible. But you're going to go through it, because you're going to go through this period where you no longer you don't fit in with the people that you used to fit in with, but you're not yet there where you could fit in with the people you want to fit in with. And there's a lot of people also on that journey, which means they can be a little bit less lonely, but that's probably another topic for another video. So most people aren't really good with themselves. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the people, let's say you're hanging around with your friends, how often do people check their phones? All the time. When you're with maybe your family, how often are they checking their phones? All the time. People are constantly looking for dopamine. Have you actually just thought about just sitting in a room with yourself for half an hour? I think Dr. K from Healthy Gamer GG, he talks about this exercise. I can't remember if he said this on a podcast or on one of his videos, but he basically said that there's a very therapeutic exercise where if you just stare at a wall for 2 hours, no dopamine, nothing, it's actually extremely therapeutic, because it's just you and your thoughts, and you have to confront them. And most people can't do that. So if you can get past that pain of being alone, and you are just on your own, you're good, what will end up happening is, ironically, you'll become pretty mentally strong, and you're not going to be dependent on needing to be with other people, because let's be honest, most people need to be around other people, and if you can get beyond that point, because you're no longer succumbing to these biological desires of needing to be within this tribe, and you're okay being in the wilderness for a little while, you'll develop this mental cognition that is super, super high, and mental strength that's really high. And guess what will happen? You'll end up attracting people into your life that have similar obsessions or similar interests that are aligned to yours. And it might not even be in complete alignment. You might be really obsessed with the piano, and someone else you meet is really obsessed with art. Two different sort of things. Another person might be interested in and obsessed with business. Another person might be really obsessed with finance. You'll just end up meeting people because you're okay with being alone and being okay with just being obsessed. So let's talk about what you can do about this. So should you change who you are? I don't think you need to. Now, you might need to a little bit if it makes sense to in the alignment of your longer term vision for yourself. So I would recommend the first thing to do is probably identify what actually matters to you and where you want to go. What the kind of person that you want to be, what kind of character do you want, what kind of character traits do you want, what does the person, who does you in 5 years look like, what do they look like? And when you identify what that person looks like and the behaviors that they have, you can identify the habits that they have, and you can identify the kind of people that they'll probably be spending time with. Then afterwards, you can audit and just quickly have a look around at who you're currently spending time with, and if they're currently actually helping you to get to becoming that version of yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to cut off every single person, right? You don't have to do that per se, because if you have a friend that is genuinely rooting for you to succeed, and they have your best interests at heart, and they can put your interests above their own, especially when it comes to giving you advice, then they're a good friend, and you definitely want to keep them around in your life. But in most cases, most people don't actually have that. So have a look around. Look at all the people you're spending time with. Are these the kind of people that will help you become the kind of person that you want to be in a few years? Yes or no? Now, if it's like acquaintances, just cut them out. You don't need to. You literally don't have any emotional ties there. You don't have anything to lose, really speaking, on that front. So you can just stop associating with them and just say no. With friends, just say no. There's kind of a few approaches you could take. You could just block everyone if you wanted to. That's like the real, like, really ruthless approach. The less ruthless approach is to just say no to hanging out. Over time, people will just stop asking you to meet up and hang out, because by that point, they'll just say, okay, if I ask him, he's just going to say no. So that's another approach you can use, especially if it's like with friends. Or I guess maybe not necessarily friends, but you know what I mean. And if it's with family, well, you can't necessarily cut them out of your life entirely. So what you could do is you could try to reduce the time you spend with them. So you could, if you hang out, if you meet up with your family once every 2 weeks, for example, maybe that's once a week, maybe that's once every 4 weeks or 3 weeks, and then just keep gradually increasing that distance. Now, I don't recommend you constantly you do that for every single person. You can if you absolutely need to. If you think that every single person in your life is a toxic asset and they're just hindering your ability to do anything, then yeah, fine. I think that's valid. But in most cases, they're probably not the case. What's most realistic? What the realistic situation is, you've got these strangers, and this circle will end up changing completely into a different circle, because when you change your identity of who you are and what you expect out of life, this circle, you're not going to even associate with the same circle. This is like the old circle, and then if we have we just go ahead and drag in a new circle, let's say over here, let's see, we just change the color, let's just make this green, right? So this is like a different circle compared to this, and this circle are going to be the strangers who you haven't yet met, that you will meet as a result of the identity that you are forming. The acquaintances that you currently have that aren't really serving your best needs and aren't rooting for you to succeed, you can cut them out. That's easy. With friends, you can reduce the time you spend with them. With family, you can reduce the time you spend with them. With friends, in some cases, you probably should cut them out. Like, realistically, if they are like really, really hindering your ability to do anything or to be exceptional, or live what you want, live the life that you want, then yeah, you probably should cut them out. Like, they're probably not being your friends; they're more likely acting as enemies in that regard. And if it's family, you can just reduce the amount of time you spend with them. In the realistic situation, your immediate family is probably not rooting against you. Realistically, they're probably on your side, but they just they have their own they're conditioned in a certain way. Your parents are probably conditioned in a certain way with a certain set of beliefs, and they just want to make sure that you're okay. So that's where if with family, it's probably coming out of love. With most of your friends, it's probably not coming out of love. It's probably coming out of self-serving interests in most people's cases. In some cases, you actually might have a really, really good friend, in which case, yeah, keep in contact with them. Make time to spend time with them if needed, but also be okay with going and being in the wilderness. And the final thing is, after you've made this, you've kind of like done you've kind of spent time like looking through who you're spending time with. The next thing to really do is just find people who can actually align with your interests, which is difficult to do, especially if you're like isolating yourself away from people. And the way you can find people who do align with your interests is, well, there's different ways to do it. One way is online. That's the easiest way, is finding groups of people online, through social media like Twitter, for example, or X, whatever you want to call it, maybe Discord or, Reddit, even possibly. You can find people who have these really weird niche interests that match yours, and you can start to become friends with them. Another way is maybe going to networking events in certain cases, if it makes sense to do that, or going to events where they're talking about a specific topic that you're interested in. And yeah, that's a really great place where you can find them. But you don't need to fit in. You don't need to fit in with this circle, because if you fit in with this circle, what's going to happen is you're going to sacrifice being able to get to this objective. You'll end up realistically just falling to the standard here, which is the standard that everybody else in your current society has, and not your future society, which you could have as a result of changing your identity and changing the people and the time that you spend around with people. And that's pretty much it, really. So yeah, you don't need to fit in per se, and it's okay if you don't. If you don't fit in, it's probably a good indication that it's your brain. Your brain isn't lying to you. If you don't feel like you fit in, it's probably for good reason. It's probably because your brain's saying, "Hey, we need to find people who, align with our long-term interests." And it's okay to be on your own for a while. You're not going to be alone forever. You just won't be around with your current circle for a while, until you get out of this wilderness block and you've gone past that lonely chapter. And that's it.